Hey thinkers, welcome to this week's episode of the Thinking Podcast. I'm your host, Jeffrey Wu, and I'm excited to have Nate Krasnoff with us. So Nate is a VC, a venture capitalist at Wildcat Ventures, and has, just in the earlier conversation before jumping on here, has very interesting productivity hacks given that he's a young, hustling venture capitalist, figuring out I think starting to master, the game of Silicon Valley. So
as we all are,
an interesting skill set and productivity hacks. And what connected us to you from NutriBox was that you recently went on a journey to go up on Kilimanjaro, the tallest mountain in Africa, and used one of our nootropic products, Sprint, to help get you up there. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'd love to discuss a few different aspects of your background and your work style and how different biohacks are helping you become a more optimal, more productive version of yourself.
Sure. Happy to dive in wherever.
Yeah, I think one thing that I think is very mysterious about Silicon Valley is this notion of like venture capitalist startups. How did you get into this space? I think obviously a lot of our listeners are in Silicon Valley, but I know we have other listeners just across the world that always look at Silicon Valley as a sort of this mystical place.
Yeah, it's a really good question. For me, I consider myself very fortunate. The way I got into Silicon Valley was I went to college, undergrad and master's in engineering at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, and there was a woman by the name of Elizabeth Patterson, who at that time was the chief talent officer at a venture fund called Moore Davidow. 3 of the GPs from Moore Davidow and 1 GP from Interwest came together to join Wildcat. And Elizabeth has been a longtime mentor of mine since October of 2013, so coming up on 4 years. And when we met, I was building and racing electric boats. And at that time, I had a 60-person-ish engineering team while at Carnegie Mellon. It was one of the things I was pretty proud of in my personal career. And she tracked me across that.
Is this like a hobby? This is like a competition?
So we raced them professionally in 2 regattas, one in the Netherlands and one in Monaco, in the summer of 2014. Having been working on this professionally for like 2.5 years.
Okay.
So after that, I moved to San Francisco and I reached back out to Elizabeth and we were chatting about what I should be kind of thinking about next, and that ended up taking me to a company building augmented reality motorcycle helmets. And after that experience, which I learned a lot from, ended up chatting with Elizabeth again, and she introduced me to one of the GPs at Wildcat, and then kind of the rest is history. But I came in as an unpaid intern and didn't have any role for me, and just kind of worked there for a while, and then was fortunate enough to have them hire me. So the answer to your question is, for everybody it's a little different. For me it was a 3-year interview process,
developing the mentor relationship
across developing really strong relationships. And Elizabeth is still a major part of my life as a mentor, and she's the chief talent officer at Wildcat now, and so we get to work together now too, which is pretty amazing. So I'm very humbled by that opportunity. But basically what it came down to was creating an opportunity for myself. And then,
do you always know you wanted to be an investor? Or, it sounds like you did a lot of just hands-on and more operational things in your academic career.
So for a long time, I only ever built things, right? So now that I don't build things, it's certainly a different lifestyle. But the interesting part about VC in comparison to being an individual contributor or a founder or whatever, is that as a founder you're building one thing really excellently,
right?
In this case it's nutritional products,
right?
But as a venture capitalist, I have the opportunity and the pleasure of being able to work with people across all 13 of our verticals, right, that we look at.
Yeah.
So as the only associate at Wildcat, I support all 4 of our GPs, and through that process, I'm helping all of them across their respective verticals. So if we make 10 investments a year and all 10 of them are in different verticals, right? That's that breadth is something that you would never have the opportunity to do as a founder,
right?
As I'm sure that right?
Yeah,
that's what you dream about is NutriBox.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting analogy because I think it's definitely like very intellectually stimulating. Where like every meeting, every conversation, every space you look at, it's like a completely different context, different subject matter. So you're always just being stimulated by like just new content and new areas.
Totally. It's the perfect job for somebody with ADD.
Yeah. Because
it's such a massive amount of context switching.
Right.
That there's no way to control.
Right.
The flow is so massive, that inflow of new ideas. I also actually tell people about VC that are kind of disillusioned by tech.
Okay.
That VC is a really awesome opportunity for that, to be
undisillusioned.
Undisillusioned.
Okay.
That's a new word. We're gonna take that one with us. But because you go through a shitty startup experience and you're like just really you bummed out. You're trying to figure out like what do you want to do next, and being in VC for me was a super interesting way to be re-energized about the world, and meeting entrepreneurs are like, we are going to change the future, we're going to it's going to be us.
Yeah.
This is our vision and how we're going to get there, and meeting people like that every single day. How could you not be excited, right, about what the future holds?
I mean, I think that's the positive lens to look at it, because I think that it's interesting where I think you just continue to see like this increasing bifurcation where some I'm curious actually the exact percentage breakdowns, but some group of people get more disillusioned where like tech is like this, like disrupting people's jobs. It's it's accruing wealth to the top. Or I think the right lens to look at it is from a positive direction, because at the end of the day, like it's inevitable that tech progresses. Like we cannot just stop. Be like, hey, no one think about making new things. So we might as well look at it from a positive, responsible perspective. So
there's like two things there, right? Which I totally agree with you. One is, when they invented the wheel, people were like, oh my God, what do we do with this? And now look what happened, right? But the other thing is, I think that there really is a constructive and a destructive approach to technology. Right. Where it's like we want to actively displace as many people as possible, or you want to build everyone up together. Yeah. And I think there's a way to do the latter in a for-profit way. Yeah. Distinctly for-profit. So, in a venture-backable way. So we started one of our newest companies called Greenfig. Okay. Was started on that premise. Basically, imagine the world of Fortune 500 companies that have a massive amount of potential workers that will be displaced in the next 5 years. And then on the same half of that, you have college graduates coming out of liberal arts degrees that are going to be in the same debt of $250,000 for their education as the engineer from Stanford. Right. So one has a real opportunity to pay off those loans in a reasonable amount of time, and one may never pay off those loans. Right. And so how do you help the liberal arts major from a random small town university when there's very little opportunity for them today to really advance, but there's large intractable job markets that really need people that have personal skills. Right. So how do you bridge the gap between the art history major from somewhere in Nebraska and the tech job that needs an enterprise sales associate or a customer success person, et cetera, okay, right? Yeah. People that really, they're still human-facing roles and won't be automated for a long time. Right. So that's what Greenfig's trying to do. Okay.
Yeah. No, I think absolutely. So going from talking it on a personal basis, right? Like you say, the VC world is like this fire hose of information. What have you developed in terms of like different regimens or protocols that help you manage and stay on top of all of that?
Mm-hmm. I haven't met any associates that do a really, really good job of staying on top of the fire hose. And narrowing your focus is, a good way to do it, and creating a personal brand around particular verticals, whether it's AI or education or whatever, is a good way to limit that inbound flow, because people start to recognize you as a leader in whatever space. So that's probably the best way. But if you look really broadly like we do, picking one space to focus on ends up being really hard, because if you take the broad macro thesis that we have of workforce innovation,
right,
well, that could be done in fintech or in ed tech or through AR or
right,
through robotics,
right,
or through digital health,
right,
and medical imaging. So you could take it any which way. So how do you position yourself in that way so that it's
so it basically means like not sleeping.
kind of not sleeping. Yeah, good segue there. So it's kind of not sleeping, and you and I were talking about this before I jumped on, but because one, I'm outward facing, and two, I'm in a support role supporting my GPs, my 4 GPs. My time really isn't mine, but that, with the implication of that, is that there's still a lot of support, a lot of work that goes in that I'm responsible for, and we're beholden. VC is the funny thing about VC is that we're just a startup, one level obfuscated, right? Like, your customers are your customers,
right, and
you're beholden to your investors. But my customers are you guys, and we're beholden to our investors, who are LPs.
Yep.
Right. So it's all the same. It's all one hand feeds the other.
I think that's like the next level realization of how everything works, right? Like, venture capitalists are also, I don't envy it as like an easy job. I think a lot of people think, oh, it's easy to like give away money, but it's like very hard to find good investments and return capital to your LPs.
Right. And there's lots of studies about how there's like more capital being deployed in venture capital than any other time in history, et cetera, et cetera. So the implication of that is that there's too much money chasing too few good deals. And so then deploying capital irresponsibly is irresponsible. So then how do you be really thoughtful about what you invest in?
And then it's also like the best returns accrue up to like the top 10% of funds, where everyone else basically loses money. So it's not an easy game. I mean, but I think it's same with startups, right? Like, only a few startups really make it through.
It's like 1 in 10,000 become a unicorn. Something like that. And 80% of companies fail between like seed and Series B. Yeah. And that's kind of the stat that we use to form our personal thesis. Right. But yeah, we call it the traction gap. Yeah. But from initial product release to like, for an enterprise company, the scaling phase of that is like 500K MRR. And so 80-something% fail. It's an absurd amount. And if all this capital is going in, right, how do you get people through that phase? Yeah. Right. It ultimately comes down to like good governance and good guidance, right? Yeah. But it's a hard road for everybody.
Yeah. So
you have to have a character defect to start a company, I think.
Well, I think the way I look at it is that I think as a startup founder, we think about building out extraordinary outcomes, right?
Totally.
Like, that's like where it's interesting from a VC startup perspective, but also I think from a personal perspective, I think that's why, I think when we talk about character flaw, or it's like some sort of character out of standard deviation, right? Like, you have to be extreme in some areas.
Yep, that's for sure. That was the first question one of my GP asked this entrepreneur when he met us. Like, he was a young entrepreneur, and the question was like, so which character defect do you have? I was like, that's such a good question.
That's funny. So I think going back to like you not, just teasing into that point of you not necessarily owning your time, right? So like you're very sort of client facing to your GPs, as well as like the companies that you guys invest in or doing due diligence on.
Yeah, because a lot of times
like
we're
it's
the
like
front lines,
within
especially
normal
diligence.
office hours.
Yeah.
And I guess basically what you're saying is that after the external facing hours, you just have just stuff that you also just need to get through.
Sure.
So it's basically like the normal working day is like basically when you're talking to people, and then like late at nights, early mornings, that's when you actually have to like have time to actually do your own quote unquote other work.
Totally, right? And everyone has their own schedules. Some people like do their partner stuff, which is basically Mondays are usually for most VCs shut down with partner meetings and entrepreneur pitches when they come in and pitch partnerships. And then a lot of people take meetings between like Tuesday and Thursday. And then a lot of people that I feel like have reduced a lot of friction from their system respond to all their emails on Fridays. Right. Because it just accumulates. Interesting. And then they try to clear it out. But it's haven't figured out the best way yet, but what I've been doing since like for a long time, it's probably since 2013, is that the way I keep my mind sane is that I keep these little notebooks around, so I always carry one with me. The one I'm obsessed with now is a company called Lecterm that I've been using for a while. It's a German brand. They have page numbers.
Okay.
So that's obviously way better than Moleskine, which never has a page numbers. I mean, come on. And also table of contents. And I probably have like 60 of these that I've accumulated over the years. So just like as a way to, because there's so much coming in. How do you, if you just like, oh, I'll remember that. I promise you won't. So that's just the way that I've always just kept record. But the other thing is like, we were just talking about polyphasic sleep, right? So if you're working between the hours of a normal hours of like 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. or whatever, and then you're trying to build your own network, so you're at dinners or back-to-back dinners sometimes between 6 and 10 or whatever it is, or happy hour or whatever, and then all of a sudden you still have all this work to do. So when do you do it? Well, you got to do it between the hours of 10 p.m. and 8 in the morning.
Yeah.
So and that's, in my opinion, that's when I like to work the most, because nobody else is there bothering you, right? There's nobody to distract you or pull you in a direction.
To be awake.
Yeah, and basically, and so so I ended up in like an accidental polyphasic sleep cycle, and I've been doing that since I was building boats in 2000. That would have been probably way back to 2000 and almost 2012.
So like, what does that look like? So like you.
Yeah, so when we were building boats, it was waking up in the middle of the night to get on a conference call with our the European race directors, so that we would see if there were any fires to put out. Then I'd go back to sleep. Then I'd start my day. Then I'd go to class.
So
then I'd take a nap. Then I'd start to like 3 in the morning. Yeah. So those meetings would always be like 2, 3, 4 in the morning, because that's when they're starting their day.
Yeah.
And then then I'd go to class for a few hours, skip a class, take a nap, go to the next classes, build stuff.
You basically like sleep like 2 hours at a time.
So that's one way to do the polyphasic thing.
Okay.
So when I was building boats, it was like the 4-2-2-1 or whatever.
Okay.
But now it's like it comes in cycles, right? So I don't it's like a 2-month cycle of one and then a 2-month cycle of another. It just depends on what is like the major fires that we're putting out today.
Yeah.
So
what's your current sleep schedule then?
Yeah. So like right now it's probably like two REM cycles a night, and then 3 20-minute naps.
Wow.
Through the day.
So
yeah,
like a REM cycle typically takes 90 minutes to get through one full REM cycle.
Yeah.
Right. So you have like a 3-hour core sleep block and then 20-minute naps.
Yeah, 20 to 30-minute naps, something like that. So like
And this is sustainable for you. Many people have tried, but it's very hard to sustain.
You can ask our analyst Laura. So we Uber down to the office together on Mondays for the partner meetings together, and like 9 out of the 10 Mondays I'm like in a nap. But that's only because we Uber down at like 8 or 9, and I've already been up since like 4:30 or whatever, or 5. Yeah. So, so by that point, it's like already time for like your first
Yeah, and I've heard that
first gap.
If you miss,
it's gone. It's
very
terrible.
hard.
Oh yeah, it's terrible.
Like if you miss your nap, like you're totally thrown off.
Oh yeah, it's true. And so on Mondays, it's really hard really hard because.
I mean, have you been in a circumstance where it's like
always, yeah,
like you're in the podcast, you're in a meeting, like it's gonna go long.
Oh yeah, totally. So
I got a nap, like you just.
And so like that's where that's where things like your products come into play, right? Where it's like it can help you close that gap between sleep cycles in like critical situations, right? So like for example, I told you on Mondays it's like the partner meeting days, which are the critical days for VC firms, and everyone's structured a little bit differently, but for us a lot of things happen on Mondays, and including one-on-ones with a lot of the GPs.
Okay.
So, and those are always in the afternoons because the pitches are always in the mornings.
Yeah.
So a lot of times they just roll it, the day rolls through. And so those are examples where it happens all the time, where there's like no opportunity to catch your breath for a second. And during the day in an office where it's high intensity office, and you never get the opportunity to close your eyes for a second, right? So finding ways to bridge that gap between that is really important. And so like trying to push for what I end up finding myself doing a lot is I end up pushing myself until like 4:30 or 5
on
Mondays, because that's when I'm in the Uber next back up to the city, where I can like mellow out
So
for a
like
second.
you have like sprints or like
Sprints,
go-tos.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sprints to, like, push you
exactly.
through.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Green
That's a
tea,
crazy
green
use
tea,
case. I mean,
coffee.
that's like one of the most
Yeah.
aggressive ways of using sprint, I would say, that I've heard of. I mean, beyond just also using it for the Kilimanjaro hype. I mean, that's interesting. I mean, so Mondays are pretty like shot at the end of the day, right? Because like if
Yeah.
you're not getting your naps in, you're basically running off of 3 hours of sleep.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is why, so I'm part of this this group called Monday Meditations,
Okay.
which I haven't been able to go to because I've been traveling like a crazy person for the last couple months. But Monday Meditations is this amazing group that I've been a part of since February of 2016.
Okay.
And it was like right after I left the Augmented Reality motorcycle helmet company. I got hooked up with these guys, and it's on Monday evenings at 8, and I go, and it's the perfect day to do like have a group meditation session.
Okay.
Because you're like coming off the weekend, and for people who don't work on the weekends, you're enjoying yourself. I work on the weekends, but for people who don't work on the weekends, you're having a good time, etc. And you go into your Monday and you're just depressed, right?
Yeah.
It's just the worst. And then you come out of your Monday and you're like, God, that was exhausting.
Yeah.
And then you go to this community, right, where where everyone's there just like suffering through their Mondays together, and then you leave after an hour and a half being like, yeah, that was great. And then it gives you a lot of energy to get through the next 4 days.
Interesting.
So finding a community that you can detox with together is, I think, another really important hack that I've kind of established.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because I think what we've seen with the intermittent fasting community that we've structured, a lot of people do a 36-hour monk fast from Monday night to Wednesday morning.
Holy crap. That's incredible.
But it's the same, I think the same principles around like structuring like a reset period, in the early days of a week as you're just like getting back into the routine.
Totally. That's
and
right.
I think meditation is like absolutely another one of these key things that, has been sort of Eastern traditional sort of folk lore or a folk tradition, but
Totally.
I think there's a lot of emerging science and data that show that meditation has some real statistically significant effects in terms of how alert you are, how reducing anxiety, like just actually shifting your hormone levels.
And just like with startups and VC, the mystery around it, getting into stuff like this is sometimes really hard for people. Like, it's like, what do I do? And thank God there's a lot of apps now, like Headspace, etc. But where people can go do that kind of stuff. But for anyone that wants to get started, there's a book called The 5-Minute Journal that you can buy for like $20 on Amazon. And that was it's a super lightweight way to just kind of take a moment at the beginning and end of each day, just kind of reflect on the day, what goals you achieved through the day, what could have been better. And at the beginning of the day, it's like, what would make this day great?
Yep.
What am I looking forward to? What am I thankful for? And it just gives you an opportunity to kind of start your day on the right foot and then like end your day in a reflective moment, which is like the, level 0 of meditation, right?
That's interesting. How did you get into these productivity hacks? Was it more of a,
different ones, different ways.
Okay, so I'm curious. Like, did you like and one day wake up like, hey, like I'm gonna optimize myself, or has it been like you've just been collecting different
days? So the notebooks came from an old co-founder. He was like an aspiring Navy SEAL.
Okay.
And he was like, there's just no way that I can keep track of all my stuff. So I just started carrying these notebooks. And I was like, that's a good idea. I'm going to steal that. So I've been doing it for 4 years. And then the sleep thing, that was just like because I was tired. And one mid-morning, and I was like, I'm just going to nap. And then I started doing that. So that's how I got to the accidental polyphasic sleep. I don't like plan it. I'm not like a diligent polyphasic sleeper. I just like... just when I'm exhausted, it just happens to shake out that it looks pretty much like polyphasic sleep.
Right.
So that's that one. And the reason why is because I did my master's and bachelor's at the same time.
Okay.
And then we had started this.
Finished that in 4 years.
Yeah.
While running
while running a team, okay. And then we had built a couple for-profit arms. One was called I think that one's, I don't know if that one's still going. It's called November Mike, and then I still have a Delaware C Corp called Concan, and none of them have ever really been active. But we were trying to get that build that as the for-profit arm of the boats, but we realized that nobody cares about electric boats.
Maybe it's a little bit early.
Well, yeah, it's not a problem. It's like your customer base doesn't care about a lot of the problems that you're trying to solve in that market, so it's a mismatch. But the
but the price for electric cars.
Maybe well, exactly, right. But when you think about the Tesla thing, right, it's like he built the electric car and then marketed it as like, look at how freaking cool you will be driving this, and that's what got the adoption, not like the fact that it was an electric car. So the premise is, there was a lot of things going on, and that's why I needed to sleep more. Yeah. So then, or find times when I could sleep to sleep. Right. So, and what was the other one? Oh, PEDs. So we were talking about like the sprint thing. Yeah. And for a long time it was Red Bull, and I was like, oh my God, I'm killing myself with this. Yeah. And so, there has to be other ways. So, it was like chugging black tea. Right. That doesn't work, obviously, because after a certain point, your caffeine tolerance levels out. Right. And so, finding natural solutions that can really that can help you get going is a way that is really important. Yeah. 100%. That can help you balance your lifestyle, especially when it's intense. Yeah. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, I think it's helpful to just get a sense of just like, okay, like
came out of necessity,
which I think is probably like, all, creativity comes out of necessity in a lot of ways. That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think from my perspective, it started off with like, after selling my first company to Groupon, I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do next, but, sure. Like I knew that a big company long-term gig was not my cup of tea, and it's like, okay, as like an engineer, if you don't know what necessarily the end problem you want to solve, you might as well solve like an abstract problem of making yourself smarter or myself smarter, more productive in the meantime. So when I do find the next possible thing to work on, I'll be a lot more efficient at it.
That's interesting.
And then that's a cool way to go about it. And then it was just that in of itself became a goal of itself. Like, how do we just become more optimal? Performing, cognitively, physically, metabolically more efficient than before. And I think, so I guess a little bit more, I guess with an end in mind, but like fasting was something that like came out of the community where it's like, hey, this is like an interesting thing that we should look at, right? Like, I think a lot of people have been looking at meditation as something to incorporate into like a proper regimen.
People do it. That's how you get better at it, right? Yeah. So I find myself when I don't meditate for like a month at a time or whatever when I'm traveling a lot, I come back and go into Monday and I'm like, oh my God, I am terrible at this.
So it's a 90-minute meditation session.
It's not really 90 minutes because it really is more about the community part than the meditation part, as like that functions as a major reset in and to itself, where you know that you're gonna have a pretty consistent community that shows up every Monday. But the when you do get into the meditation part, it's like, man, I'm really sucking wind right now. Yeah. Versus like trying the one that I thought was most interesting, and I couldn't believe this was possible until it happened. Was that like they like try to breathe into your elbow, and I was like, this is not gonna work. And then like 4 breaths, and you're like, holy crap, I can breathe into my freaking elbow. That's amazing. Or like like pick a toe and like try to breathe into it. If like you really focus on it, I was like blown away by that. Yeah, I was only able to do that one time, but I was going like pretty consistently, like 4 or 5 weeks in a row. But that one instance was like fascinating to me. Yeah, that you could like manipulate mindset, like pinpoints of feeling based on breath and focus. Right. And I was like, geez, that's cool. Yeah, as a recovering athlete, in theory, I should have known that, but in practice, 5 years out from being any kind of athlete, that was pretty cool to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, tell me about Kilimanjaro. So how did that journey
good question.
Get started?
So around April of 2016, I started to try and solicit my buddies to climb Kilimanjaro. Yeah. And nobody wanted to go with me. I was like, dude, I'm injured, or no, that sounds terrible, or or whatever, right? And and I was like, fine, don't go with me. So then I kind of tabled it, and I just signed on with Wildcats, so I was picking up that, and
Right.
I'd also just gotten back from Cuba, so I was still traveling, still doing fun stuff. But I was in New York in September for a conference. By the way, all this happened between April of 2016 and January 1st of 2017.
Okay.
So this whole story. And I was in a conference in September, and in my previous life, I used to work with a band, and I hadn't seen the guitarist and the lead guitarist in quite a long time, and he now works at JP Morgan. And so he and I got drinks, and to catch up for a second, and he brought our friend Gloria, who we both knew from fashion. She was a fashion designer who we had met, we've been friendly with when we were working together, and Gloria brought her friend Chloe. So Chloe works splits time between San Francisco and New York, and Chloe and I were for coffee one day when she was in New York, or when she was in San Francisco. And I was like, "What are you doing for the holidays?" And she goes, "Oh, I have no plans." I was like, "I was thinking about doing something crazy like climbing Kilimanjaro or going on like a more adventurous trip and all my friends here are lazy." And she goes, "I'm in." 2 days later, we had a trip booked over the holidays.
So she's adventurous too.
Oh yeah, she's totally crazy, and she and I are still friends. I just caught up with her last week when I was in New York, her boyfriend's a saint. He's so patient. He's like, "Yeah, go do all your crazy trips." And she has a hard time finding people who are equally of that mindset as well, like to go chase that kind of stuff, right? So literally in 2 days, we had a trip booked, passports out for visas, and like ready to go to Tanzania. So, as with all things that happen, timing was bad, right? So that happened now we're in October. So we're in the middle of October at this point. And so now we're in the middle of October, and I'm home for Thanksgiving, and I have a biopsy done on my back for like some mole that wasn't even a thing, right?
Okay.
I'm like, okay, this mole's been on my back for like 20 years. Why is now it's cancerous all of a sudden?
Right.
So it wasn't naturally, but anyway, the moral story is that they put 10 stitches in my back, right in the center of my back, right where the backpack would be.
Whew.
So in addition to that, plus somehow acquiring like essentially what became walking pneumonia. Yeah, it was a good time. And not being an athlete for the last like 5 years, I still decided it'd be a good idea to go climb Kilimanjaro. So I trained like 0 days.
It's like a 17,000 feet peak, so
it's 19,000, I think.
19,000.
It's 5,800 something meters. I don't know. If you guys stalk my Instagram, there's a picture
miles.
there. It's crazy. Yeah. And the last day, so I wrote a blog post about this. You can, if you find me on Medium, you can read it for yourself. But it's very self-deprecating about my journey. And the last day starts at like 11:55 the night before, and you're at like 15,000 feet. And you have to basically summit that morning. So you leave at like midnight, and you summit that morning between like 7 or 8. I've summited at like 8:20 or whatever.
Okay. In the morning.
In the morning.
So it's like an 8-hour hike.
Straight uphill.
Okay.
In high altitude, right?
Okay.
And by the end, I was just like totally fried. I mean, that was the most tired I think I've ever been in my life. And
the reason to go so early is that you can see the sunrise, or
in theory.
Okay.
I missed it because I was slow. But yeah, if you're fast enough, you can actually see the sunrise.
And also gives you time to like go back down.
That's right. And I would strongly recommend for anyone who does that to try and make the sunrise, because once the sun rises, all the snow melts, and then you have to get down on the sleet.
Right.
And
so it's like slippery and.
No, it's literally like just loose rocks. Scree is what it's called. So all the rough rocks. And it was like, for me, it was like impossible to get down after literally being exhausted for 6 days, like working through pneumonia. It was totally irresponsible for me to go even do this, right? And so basically made it like, 7,000 feet up and down.
Right.
And then like 2 porters came up and grabbed me, and like we were walking arm in arm down like to that base camp, the 15,000 foot base camp.
Right. And
then our team like decided that they wanted to go to the 10,000 foot camp instead of the 12,000 foot camp on the way down. So we had to get down. Oh my God. I was like, this is going to be it for me. So I made it to like from 15,000 to like 13,000, like the next interim camp, and then got some of our porters to help me get to the 10,000 foot camp. So literally there was like a 2 hour period when I was off my feet.
Yeah.
When they were helping me get to the 12,000 foot camp to the 10,000 foot camp.
And you were backpacking with stitches in your back.
Exactly.
You were sick.
Exactly. Yeah.
Ooh.
Exactly. So the only way I made it through this whole thing was because, and literally I was like coughing up a storm. I was like eating like a box of cough drops a day. It was great. But the only thing that really got me through it was the boost from the sprint pills.
That's
I was
awesome.
like, literally, I mean, I can't even tell you. I mean, I was only taking the suggested thing of 2 a day, right? 1 pack a day, right? Which is the little to-go packs, so like 2, right? And so we were only doing that, but the premise is still the same. That, I mean, you could ask anyone on our trip. There were 12 of us on the trip. We were part of like a broader trip,
right?
Chloe and I went as part of a broader trip, but you can ask pretty much anyone on that trip, and it was that the sprint pills were the reason
that you like survived.
Were the singular reason that I made it through.
Awesome
I can comfortably say that.
No,
and
that's awesome
that and Hosea, who was one of our guides,
who was like just dragging you through.
Literally between, and then also Amadeus. It was Amadeus, Hosea, Frank, and the sprint pills. Frank was our lead guide. Amadeus was with me on the summit day. Hosea helped me on the second and third days. But yeah, it was
overall fun experience.
I would strongly recommend people do like 1 day of training at least before they go. I'm just kidding. Do like actual training.
Yeah.
But if you're in mildly good shape, you can probably do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we also were taking Diamox, which it's recommended for Kilimanjaro because it's like more of a hike than a climb.
Right.
But most we did ours with a guy that had summited Denali, and he was from Alaska, so like he's like a real adventure person.
Right.
He was explaining to us, when you do a lot of mountains, you typically don't take Diamox.
And Diamox is for
altitude sickness.
Okay.
And the reason why you don't take it for when you climb a lot of mountains in general is because you want to know that altitude sickness is hitting you, not mask the symptoms.
Right.
So I was like, oh, why are we taking it for Kilimanjaro? He goes, well, I don't know. Why are you taking it? Right.
Yeah.
But but luckily for me, altitude sickness was not an issue. But yeah,
or it was like unnoticeable on top of like pneumonia.
That's right. Exactly. Just one more thing to add to the list. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the macro, but it was 6 days. I mean, I was feeling it on the first day for sure. And, that it's like a long gradual walk up to the second camp. And we did the Machame route, which is, one of like 6 routes or whatever.
Cool.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. No, I think it's like an interesting tale, right? Like I think, it's an interesting backstory as well. So I think that covers like an interesting, it was like a 6-8 month long, like
decision to go like that. This was something I wanted to do. Right.
Yeah.
And then, it's really hard to find people that, have the time and have the willingness to go do something like that.
Right.
And so I wanted to get people to go do Elbrus, the one in Russia, but that's been kind of tabled for other reasons. And then we were going to try and do Aconcagua in South America, but I don't think anyone I even know is good enough shape to do that. That's like 7,000 meters. It's like really high. It's like 23,000 feet.
Ooh.
Like you need to be actually in
like
decent shape for
like
that.
Starting to be like professional, like training.
You need to be like actually trying.
Right.
You can't just like show up with
and
stitches
have
in your
porters
back.
like
you can't just show up with stitches in your back and whatever to go do that.
Yeah, disclaimer: Sprint's not gonna fucking power you up Everest.
No,
right?
it's not gonna help you. That one's not gonna help you. But we've been a couple of my buddies and I've been talking about doing like a long motorcycle trip in South America, or doing like something equally stressful that would probably require some sort of additional boost. So who knows what that will be, but we haven't settled on it yet. But that's the one that most of us have been that's a lot of us have been most excited about. Yeah, is like picking a starting place, whether it's in Ecuador or in Peru or whatever, and going south.
Interesting. Yeah, no, it sounds like you just jam action into your life, whether it's in work or within, on your time off, which is cool.
I appreciate that. There's like two ways to look at your life, right? You can like actively go chase your life, or you can be like a spectator on life.
No,
if you look back, you're like, oh man, I
that,
didn't do any of those things. Well, it's like, why didn't you do any of those things?
Yeah.
Like,
I think that resonates, very strongly with me, and I think a lot of the people that are listening, where the way I look at it is that a lot of humans live in a very narrow band of experiences, right?
Yeah,
like you have like a standard 9 to 5 thing that like you kind of don't care about, and you take like very standard like time vacations or trips or something. Well, like you're living a life. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but there's like you're living a life that a lot of other people have lived. So I think it's like, if you can do things with your time that are outside like the norms, I think that's where it's more interesting.
Totally. It just gives you like more data points on how to live a much fuller life. I worked in finance, like not venture, but like actual finance for about 8 seconds, and
like what, investment banking?
Yeah, I got fired. It was a great time. And one of the lessons that I took away from that is like the managing director's theory on life was like imagine if you separated all the facets of you as a person into different orbs,
right.
And like all those orbs could be measured like quantifiably, and it'd be like whatever it is, patience, work ethic, humor, or whatever,
right.
And every time you come across like a hardship or a difficult situation,
right.
you like account or a failure, you like take a step back and assess which of the orbs that created that hardship or failure or something block, and you like try to actively work on that orb to bump that needle up, so that the next time that situation is presented to you, you can like be a better version of yourself.
Interesting.
Right. And then like if you reflect back on your life, all the orbs are maximized to the best of their ability, and then you were like the best version of yourself. So I thought that was an interesting approach. That's one philosophy. I try to ascribe to that. I thought that was really meta, but it's really hard to be introspective and do that. And frankly, I don't think that he does that either. But I thought
at least having some sort of framework to think about it at least is better than nothing.
That's right. The other problem is like you start to develop your frameworks, and then once your frameworks are set,
it's autopilot.
And then your life and then that like so. I've been reading this other book, and it's actually called My Struggle. Not that My Struggle. It's by a Norwegian author named Karl Ove Narsgaard.
Okay.
And one of the things he's talking about is like once you develop those fixtures, those frameworks, and you never start to like reflect on why those frameworks even exist or what's valuable about them, like time starts to move really fast, right? And then like that's when you like look up and all of a sudden you're like 10 years older, right? Because you like never like push yourself to learn and relearn,
right?
Which is what's cool about tech is that it's constantly learning and relearning, questioning your assumptions. Right?
Yeah, no, I think that's the highest meta level point in how we should be self-respect or self-introspective all the time, right? Like to keep
it's really hard to do
and refining your frameworks. I think having strong frameworks allows you to make decisions quicker and helps you like autopilot into good behaviors.
Totally. I mean, that's like the OODA loop, right? That's how AI works, right?
Yeah, and then like reflect on your frameworks every now and then so you can keep refining your tools.
Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah. So I mean, it's mostly about just living like the best, like living your best life, right?
Yeah.
That's all of us want.
I wish more people, I think, would be actually thoughtful about it. I think our society would be a lot better if each individual node is better. Our thesis, like if every single human is better,
totally,
we're creating a better society.
It's one of the luxuries that we have, like extreme luxuries that we have in Silicon Valley, where we're surrounded by, as you describe them, nodes, as individuals that are constantly trying to be introspective, right? Constantly trying to make the world around them better, whether destructive or constructive. Ultimately, even the destructive people are trying to ultimately create a future that they believe is a better one than today. Right. And that's just not that's not how a lot of people, as you described, the people, that's not how a lot of people.
Yeah, they're almost living
reality.
like in subsistence, right? It was first, like,
and that's not necessarily their fault, right?
Yeah.
It's not their fault, and that's the future of work is something I was just talking about with somebody else. I've actually had two very interesting conversations about this over the last two days, about what the future of work looks like, and is it even, and what happens when that future of work, then there's no longer work. So
like universal basic income, like in a world with like infinite resources or like near infinite resources. Right.
Exactly. Like what happens when like this is exactly what we were talking about yesterday, where it's like the concept of capitalism is great when there's scarce resources, but what happens when there's no more scarce resources?
Right.
So it's like there was that big Oxford study like a month ago. It's like all work will be automated in 125 years. So
what is your?
it's crazy.
I have an opinion here. What is your theoretical outcome?
Oh,
my
man.
my hypothesis would be that humans would are by nature are very competitive and are going to compete on something. So it'd be like who has like the biggest art project, or who can build like the biggest, who can play this game the best. So I think people will channel.
That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah. So my thing is like, okay, people will like, there'll be a lot of diversity across like all the types of different interests that people do have, and people will be like competing.
I think it's a great way to look at it.
In a game, if you will, around these interests.
So I think that's so. There was an Oxford study that just came out now about like when work will all be automated. But before that, in 2013, there was like their landmark study out of Oxford about all the jobs, quantifiably what their percentages were of being automated.
Right. I think I saw this report as well.
Yeah. So it's a really, really good one. It's almost impossible to not find if you try to search for it. And there's like 168 or 9 jobs that they outline that have a greater than 90% chance of being automated.
Like being a driver. It's like
on
stuff
top
like
of the
list.
That's right.
And then
That's
being
right.
an archaeologist is like pretty low on the list, because like no one's gonna build like a robot to like dig up dinosaur bones.
100%.
Yeah.
They had almost an exact number, like 100 and something, 170 or 168 or whatever it was, almost identical number of jobs that had a less than 10% likelihood of being automated. And a lot of them were like pretty fun jobs.
Right.
Like being an innkeeper at a remote area, right? Or something like things that you would like want to do, artist, etc. But the things that are classically today don't have the same financial reward as being, something that might get automated out today or soon in the next 5-10 years.
Right.
So, that value chain, that how we value roles and what that looks like, and, how people fill their time. That's what I think is going to be a big debate over the next, couple decades, but I don't know what that's going to look like.
I mean, I think that's why like we're living in some exciting times where I think, one, it's like possible to enhance humans, enhance ourselves, and then 2, it's possible that we get replaced. A lot of our functions.
And is that the goal? Is that the goal to get replaced? I don't know. And then the other thing is, on the other side of that, like, right, are we being super naive sitting in a tech office in the FiDi in San Francisco, and where the Oxford guys are at a very prestigious university,
right?
And are we looking at it from their perspective? Our perspective is one perspective, but like, will autonomous cars ever really get mainstream dominance in how long does it take for them to get to Idaho?
Sure.
How long does it take for them to get to other places in Middle America or the South or whatever, right? When does that happen? When does AI and automation like start to really get there and that rollout? Like, on their mind isn't autonomous cars necessarily. That's a problem that we see every day here.
Yeah. But I would say that like I think Silicon Valley is really just building the future in terms, and also just setting culture.
The future, but for sure. But when in a time frame, like it will for sure hit here.
Yeah.
But when does it hit, everybody else? And I don't know what the answer to that is, but I think it's going to be longer.
Right. Well, future is still yet to be written. Yeah. Well, but I imagine, like, I think
it can't be the same amount of time that it hits here. Right.
Yeah.
It just can't. It's literally impossible.
Sure. I'll agree with that. But I think like the adoption curve will be pretty quick because, I don't know. I think that quote that Travis Kalanick gave about like Ubers, where like the guy in the car with you is like the biggest cost. And
for all these things, delivery.
It's like there's literally a dude or a woman that like might not necessarily be there, and that's like the biggest cost of like transportation.
And that's for all of these companies, right? Like, I mean, it's the biggest part of Instacart and DoorDash's thing. It's all these delivery services, Postmates. Driver is the most expensive part for all of them. UPS, most expensive part. For FedEx, most expensive.
So I think like with capitalism, right? Like there is such a cost savings to be had. Like just capitalistic tendencies will make that just adopt quite quickly, unless there's interesting regulation, and we'll see.
And consumer adoption. So anything that touches the consumer. Anything that ultimately touches the consumer, the UX has to be so good that they don't miss the driver. like
And-
the delivery person dropping it off.
And I think people are pretty cost conscious, right? So I think,
Yeah.
I think if you look at like I think the previous argument with like the Walmart mega stores with like quote unquote lower quality mass produced stuff or like the handmade bespoke stuff. I mean, Walmart's and like became a massive business because they were able to just offer services really really cheaply. Like my thesis, my assumption would be that if it took $2 to give me my burrito from from the Mission as opposed to $10,
The $8 they're charging me now.
like
I
I would use it probably more than 4 times as often.
I know it's true. No,
Right?
it's 100% true. And it's 100% true. There's a McKinsey study that came out, I don't know, in September of last year, and one of the stats they throw out is like 50% of all shoppers who buy things online are their number one motivation is price.
Okay. Yeah.
So you're dead right
Yeah.
in your assumption.
Yeah.
So it's true that not only does the way that we think about it at Wildcat is yes, understanding that the price and this is the most important.
Right.
How do you work on the price and the UX?
Yep.
Because if the user doesn't like it, then it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
It'll never get on.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Yeah. I think those are the 2 key factors.
That's how we think about it anyway. Who knows if we're right, but that's how I think about it.
Yeah, no, I think we're touching definitely into like the future things. I want to wrap up here.
No
like
worries.
what is interesting in terms of the future, like I think that's a good, closing point here. Like what's in the future for you personally? Like I guess we touched a little bit about some of the next adventures or next techniques you're trying to, but like what other sort of biohacks or other things you're trying to incorporate? And then 2, for the listeners out there who might have interesting ideas or businesses in this space, like what areas are you building leadership in, and what areas are you most excited about investing in and looking at?
Yeah. So we're not doing anything in food, personally. We haven't yet anyway. I think that's a whole nother set of problems, right?
Yeah.
Because that's really consumer facing.
All right.
And there's a whole series of price wars and politics that goes into that, especially when you're trying to sell into big box retail, etc.
Right.
So you guys are direct to consumer, but so that's cool. But we're looking at a lot of retail stuff. We do a lot of retail stuff. We do a lot of IoT stuff.
Okay.
We're looking at. I'm personally really interested in like workforce innovation in the context of a lot of these things, hence Greenfig.
Yep.
I still haven't found an enterprise VR or AR company that has knocked me off my socks, knocked my socks off.
Yeah.
Which I think would be cool. I think it's really impressive.
Yeah.
I want to invest in enterprise AR.
Yeah.
We haven't found anything that's like that I need to invest in yet. Let's see what else are we super stoked about. There's like a couple intractable problems that we're looking at that like previously like these problems that like have existed for the last 10 years in tech that people have been solving like kind of poorly, but because of AI and machine learning and deep learning and whatever, you can now make these intractable problems tractable.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty fascinating. So
Right.
we've looked at probably 30 of those companies over the last 6 months in depth. So that's pretty fun. And so we're going to continue to push that pretty hard. But one of our venture partners is Geoff Moore.
Okay.
And Geoff, like, he worked Crossing the Chasm, et cetera. So one of his new frameworks is, focusing on how these new systems of intelligence leverage data exclusive, like as the new source of currency, and make the data, which was previously like very scarce and expensive, how they make that, ubiquitous and almost free, right? In the same way that search and Google made search free.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting. Okay.
So we're looking at a lot of things that
that's
fall
a
into
big
that,
theme.
a big
Yeah.
theme
Yeah.
as one of our big themes.
Interesting. And then personally, like what are the next
Oh,
adventures
personally.
or different biohacks you want to try or
Yeah.
personal things you want to get into?
I'm for the first time in my life, I got airline status, which I don't know if I should be proud of that or like embarrassed.
United.
Unfortunately, yes. I if anyone wants to send me a boxing, a helmet. I'll happily wear it on my next United flights, and put the pictures up. That nobody's tried to box me yet on a United flight, but time will tell. And trying to biohack through that.
Interesting.
Because that I think is starting to catch up with me with jet lag, etc. Yeah. So that I think is my next probably personal pursuit for biohacking. I don't have a good answer yet. So if anyone has suggestions, please let me know.
Yeah, I mean, I think with polyphasic sleeping, I mean, that's like already like a pretty hard intervention or a hard protocol to stick to. So
totally.
So yeah, I think that would be interesting because I think especially with jet lag, I mean, I think Yawn, our product, is pretty good to help people reset. But in terms of just like constantly shifting
time zones and locations, and
it's I mean, it's just a hard on the body. Period.
Totally. So yeah, I don't know, and so I don't know what to do about that.
Yeah.
Yet, but I'm gonna try and figure.
We'll get you some Yawn and see how that works for you.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Cool. Anyways, Nate, this is an awesome, fun conversation. I think we touched upon a lot of the interesting areas from like your personal outlooks into different just like the future of how the world works. So appreciate the time.
Oh yeah, no problem. This is super fun for me, and thank you guys for having me. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. It was fun to chat with Nate. Definitely a nice conversation touching upon a bunch of different topics. So you can always find us on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube. Send us questions and keep suggesting awesome guests to come on our show. Thanks, thinkers. See you next week.